Chapter 1 Kendrea. Tendrils of cold snaked down my arm, causing me to shiver. I felt my fingers move through something denser than air. Darkness surrounded me. I couldn't hear, all I could do was feel. Suddenly, warmth battled the cold away from me, and I felt as if my arm was sitting by a fire, roasting a marshmallow. My arm must have gotten too close to the fire, because in the next second, pain attacked my skin just briefly before subsiding into a dull throb. I waited for another sensation to take over, but the blindfold was pulled from my eyes. I removed my earplugs and looked up at the tallish, wiry guy standing before me. He rubbed a towel across his left arm, emerald green eyes casually peeking out at me from behind wavy black hair that needed to be cut immediately. "Only two this time, Damien?" I joked. "Too easy. First you put your hand into an ice bucket, then you burned your arm in fire." Damien grinned at me slyly and asked, "What kind of fire, though?" You gotta be kidding me. How am I supposed to know?" "You gotta at least try. You might need to know someday." I sighed and tried to look back and remember my experience. The pain was concentrated in one spot, so it was a small fire. What was producing the fire? I thought harder, and that was when I noticed something I had overlooked last time. While my right arm was being burned, my left arm was holding something that felt metallic. It was small and rectangular. "It was a lighter!" I exclaimed. Then, doubting myself and hoping I wasn't wrong, I added, "Right?" I glanced up at Damien, his presence calm and familiar to me. He and I had been friends for years now. We'd always had this strange connection that had only recently begun to grow stronger. When I was 6 years old, I made it clear to my father that I no longer wanted to be contained in the castle walls. I wanted to be allowed to roam the country on my own, make friends with commoners, and go to school. We met halfway. My father allowed me to go to school with the rest of the children instead of being homeschooled. He also started letting me roam around the country, but I had to bring along at least 2 guards at all times. On my first day of school, I sat down in a chair, glancing around shyly at the other kids. Heat danced along my cheeks, and I shifted my gaze downward towards my sweaty palms. I desperately wanted to have friends. In my heart, I felt so adventurous, but I was also extremely shy. Don't ask me how that's possible. When I'd finally decided to get up and leave, I felt a small force urge me back into my seat. At the same time, a boy with dark, messy hair sat down next to me. He didn't seem nervous at all, immediately extending a hand towards me and calmly saying, "Hi, I'm Damien Wymond. What's your name?" My shyness prevented me from looking into his eyes directly, but my lips drew up into an unexpected smile. I quickly wiped my right hand on my dress and then shook his. "I'm Kendrea Enna," I replied quickly in a quiet mumble. "You can just call me Rhea, though." He looked mildly surprised at my last name, and I immediately regretted telling him. Now he was going to give me special treatment, just like everyone else did once they knew I was a princess. But, to my complete surprise and delight, the initial signs of shock and curiosity on his face quickly turned into indifference. Then, he nodded and shot a quick grin in my direction before leaning back in his chair and skimming through a book. While he stared at the pages, I gained the confidence to look at him. His eyes were a deep green, and his skin was a bit pale, as if he was always reading books inside, just as he was now. His hair was black, wavy, and gave the impression that he hadn't brushed it in ages. At that moment, his eyes glanced in my direction, and a corner of his mouth quirked up. I wanted to look away, but for some reason, I didn't feel like I had to. Somehow, my shyness melted away. I grinned back. From that day on, we were best friends, inseparable. "Yeah, it was a lighter. We're getting really good at this," Damien remarked. He nodded once, and his hair fell down a bit over his eyes so that he had to reach up and brush it away. An army of white teeth emerged from behind his thin lips, standing straight at attention. My smile met his, and we walked together to the house without a word. Chapter 1. Kendra.